What is a red flag from an employer that people might not immediately recognize as a red flag? Anything that the manager says in the interview that doesn't line up with the job description. Yeah, we posted it's a manager level position, but this is actually a coordinator role. Yay, the description says travel is 25%, but it might be closer to 50, it just depends. We did post it as a remote job, but we prefer people to be in the office X days a week. Yay, we phrase it that way in the job description because corporate says we have to. All of those are red flags. Anything a company is vague about should be a red flag. Trying to rush a decision out of you once the offer is made. I once interviewed with a company where I would have been relocating across the country to work for them. There were 3 rounds of interviews and they left me completely in the dark for weeks on end between each round before inviting me to the next round within just a few days of when the interview would take place. After the final interview, it was over a month of silence from them until they made an offer but told me I had less than 24 hours to let them know my decision. I would have been moving to 1,000 miles away from home to a place I had never been or even seen before. Interviews were completely virtual. They wanted me to start 6 days after the offer had been made. When I asked if there was any flexibility for me to have more time to think it over or have more time to move out there, they said no. They needed the decision the next day, and if I accepted I would be starting in less than a week. I declined the offer. The sink or swim technique. It was my first day as a cashier. I got a couple of hours of training. Then I was by myself and we were dead. All of a sudden this rush came in and I was asking for help. The manager goes, "Sink or swim, we're busy back here, figure it out." Lol, I did, but let me tell you, customers were not happy because I still didn't know how to properly enter in orders, especially modifications. Asking if you are somebody who's willing to put in the time to make sure deadlines are met, work is done, or if you're the type of person who leaves when the workday is finished. This is generally corporate speak for we will be forcing you to work unpaid overtime. Having to take an online IQ test before even being considered for an interview. Backstory: when I moved to Australia, I was looking for work as a language teacher. I went in monster.com and found an advert saying that they were looking for teachers for gifted children, but that I needed to take an online IQ test to apply, needed an IQ above 125 to go for an interview. I took the test, sent in my CV and cover letter, and waited. An hour later I get an email asking to meet at a special cafe in downtown Melbourne the following day. So, I go and notice that this building was a Freemason building, and that one needed a special pass to get in. There was a little older lady waiting for me in a tacky floral print shirt and a white fisherman's hat. Immediately, she pardoned herself for wearing that hat, explaining that it was lined with aluminum to protect her from the cell phone radiation. I think nothing of it and order a coffee. Off the bat, the old lady tells me about how she has an IQ of 160 and the rarest blood type, similar to that of Tutankhamen. She goes on and on about this for a while and then begins explaining the job. She tells me that in the beginning, I wouldn't be teaching but administering tests in schools around Queensland to recruit children to special camps, where then I would be teaching. The whole thing screamed red flags. But I politely listened and got her business card if ever I had further questions. I got a proposal on the spot. I looked at the card and it said The Wise Ones. After looking it up, I noticed that it was a cult similar to that of Universal V Medicine. My interview experience there was by far the worst I've ever had. This was 3 years ago, and I still get annoyed just thinking about it. First red flag was that I had to pay for parking, which is not cheap in Boston. I was expecting them to validate, but I had to shell out over $20. When I got to the front desk I had to wait for 20 minutes before being brought back. By the time got to the conference room, noticed that almost everyone was younger than me and most likely right out of college. The HR rep pointed out the beer taps and free snacks, which may seem cool initially, but I got the feeling this was one of those places that expected you to stay late with after-hours mandatory fun. We passed a huge conference room with more than 100 people, and I was told it was an orientation. That either meant the turnover was incredibly high, or they were hiring way too many people, and layoffs were likely months away. According to the thermostat, The conference room where I had my interview was almost 80 degrees. I was in a full suit in the middle of the summer. Nobody seemed to notice or care during the entire interview. There were also no other offices or cubicles on the floor since they had the brilliant idea of making everyone work on an open floor, including the CEO. Half of the people were standing at tables with half a dozen other workers while the other half sat in lines next to each other with no dividers. You'd have more privacy at a Starbucks. To make it extra awkward, the conference room was all glass and there were 4 or 5 people who were facing me directly on the other side. This was extremely distracting to me and the interviewers. The first person interviewing me was late, as were all the rest, and the TV they were using for video conferencing did not work. It took 15 minutes to set it up, and the girl who helped fix it apologized to me profusely. I couldn't really blame her though, because it was apparently her first day. Before the interview started, I was given a list of the people I'd be interviewing. I did my homework and took notes on all of them so I could have a leg up. Every single one was a senior manager with an Ivy League degree, all of whom only worked for consulting companies before coming there. They all looked to be around 20 to 25 years old. Of the 5, only one of them didn't come off as an arrogant, entitled ass. I got the sense that they were interviewing me to help them practice on interviewing skills. Every single person read from a list of questions on a page that was given to them by HR, and they didn't engage with me at all. They'd ask a question seemingly at random, wait for my answer, then move to the next one. By the 4th person, I started getting a migraine. I should have left at that point, but I figured I'd stay to the end. The 4th guy was by far the biggest douche of the bunch. Unbeknownst to me, he came in with a case study which was similar to the ones I'd worked on in grad school. In grad school, we had a week or two working with a group to come up with a solution. This guy made me read all 3 pages while he watched in silence. Then he got up to the whiteboard and basically asked me what I would do in this situation. The study was extremely vague, as they often are, and I had almost no context. I gave it a shot, but it was clear that I wasn't telling him what he wanted to hear despite no wrong answers. He admitted to me that this was the most important part of the interview and that people are generally more prepared. When I asked how could anyone possibly prepare for these, he said they normally hire people coming from consulting companies and they coach their employees beforehand. I'm in logistics or supply chain management, and I've never in my career heard of or seen this in an interview. As I was leaving, the HR rep said she'd call me in a day. To her credit, she did, to let me know I wasn't being considered. Oddly enough, she actually had some feedback for me, mostly negative. According to her, I didn't do well on the case study, and they didn't think I'd be a good fit for their culture. I have kids and didn't live in the city. After she was done being smug, I asked her if she wanted feedback from me. She said we normally don't get feedback from candidates. But go ahead. For the next 10 minutes I brought up everything I mentioned above and more. Even if she had given me an offer, I would have outright refused regardless of the salary. She thanked me for my time, and that was the last I heard from them. A month later, another manager from my current company took a job at there. He lasted 2 weeks. If many provisions in company policy say except for employees in Colorado and California, Colorado and California have multiple statutes that are more employee-friendly than the other 48 states. So the company policy is basically saying we'll do X for employees where the state makes us, but F the rest of you. When you don't get a review until you ask for a raise, then, all of a sudden, your work is being questioned and you're being berated. My contract was ending, and my boss asked me if I would like to renew it because he was very happy with my work. Asked him for some feedback, and he said that everything is going great. Then, I asked him for a raise. And suddenly my statistics that were never mentioned to me or my coworkers before that conversation were terrible, and I was the second worst employee in the company. Tomorrow is my last day, and I'm already working in a different place. Edit. Just an edit to add that a lot of people are confused about my boss's behavior, and it can all be explained as he is a pseudo-personal coach. He always tried to manipulate me in the dumbest possible ways. But I took it because I loved my job, and I only had to talk with him once a month. Anytime they are being sketchy, not being specific, or giving you the runaround in regards to basic questions you'd ask them, like expected work hours, pay and benefits. When they refuse to tell you what your starting salary would be, or when they just avoid the question altogether. Like I didn't apply to the job to be a part of some family work culture. I came here to get a job and be paid. I went on an interview. They had me wait in the lobby. In the 5 minutes I was sitting there, 3 employees walked past me. The first just looked at me and laughed. The second said, "Leave. Leave while you can." The third made the sign of the cross at me. Later, during the interview, the hiring manager showed me the Zen room, which was a quiet room you got to go to for 10 minutes when you got too stressed out. I was offered the job. I declined. Edit. 1. They walked by separately, at different times. 2. You had to ask permission to use the Zen room. From personal experience coming out of college mechanical engineering degree, this was hands down red flag galore. This was my second real engineering job interview, so I told myself see it through. Because I need the interviewing experience, and they reached out to me for an entry-level design engineering position. They made me wait for 15 minutes in a not heated breezeway in the middle of winter. A receptionist came out 5 minutes into me waiting in the cold and asked would I need to give a 2-week notice to my current job, or can I start this week? I gave a non-answer, and I thought that was also my invitation in, and she said that the person was not ready yet, and I had to continue to wait. When I finally was greeted by the manager I'd work under, he was new to the company, 2 months at the time. He made sure I knew that for some reason. They first asked a standard "tell me about yourself," then pivoted to pay, saying, "Look, I understand what you might expect in terms of compensation, but please hear us out before you make your decision." Weird, that was not something I mentioned in my get-to-know-me pitch. We do a quick tour, and by quick I meant 2 minutes. No workers looked up from their areas as we passed through, and you could hear a pin drop. It was that silent. Next, the place is old. Inside the work area, everything looked like it was bought in the 80s. The manager casually drops, "So when you first pull into the office, leave your cell phone in your car, because having it go off at your desk is grounds for termination. If something is that important, give your family the number for the receptionist, and they can forward a call to you if you are not busy. Anyway, follow me. The owner wants to meet with you." The owner is in his 70s and the son of the founder of the company. His personal story was nice, but after the get-to-know-you stuff, no technical questions, he slides a folder across the table and says, "Quit your job today, start tomorrow, and I give you $2,000. Inside is a breakdown of their policies to highlights. Doctor's visits and funerals are unexcused absences unless you take vacation for them. You are not allowed to be more than 15 minutes late twice in a calendar year, or you are subject to termination and pay. The amount for salary was blank, so I asked about it. He stares down the manager, who looks like he saw a ghost at this point, and asks, "What do you think is fair?" I asked for a market rate for pay given my education and the position, and they countered with a significantly lower number, more than $25K a year less than my market value, saying, "We are glad to pay you that amount at a later date, but you need to go through training and onboarding. While doing that, you aren't actually doing all the responsibilities of this role, and onboarding takes 6 months, so we can negotiate a more reasonable salary then, but for now this is our offer." I said, "I understand there are costs for training, but what does that entail to justify the pay?" He said, "To learn the company you need to start from the bottom. Your first 6 months will be in the warehouse loading and unloading product from semi-trailers." I thought he was joking. He was not. I immediately said, "Thank you, I need to think this over," and walked to the door. The owner half blocks the door and says, "If you leave now, you're ruining your future. You don't understand. This opportunity will set you up for life if you're willing to make sacrifices." I say, "I'll call you tomorrow," and leave. This entire process lasted 45 minutes on a first interview. I get home and have an email from the owner saying, "How dare I leave the interview? If I had any level of experience, they'd start me closer to my desired pay. I am making the worst decision of my life by not taking this job," etc. I get a phone call about an hour later from the manager saying, "Look, I understand. You may have reservations, but if you come in tomorrow, I can give you another $500. I hung up, and that was that. This place tried to get me, a recent engineering grad, to take a warehouse job. That was pitched as the training program to become an engineer at nearly half the market rate for an engineer out of college. One that said they'd fire you for having a cell phone in the building, and that, God forbid you have to go to a funeral, you need to take a vacation day. So what is a red flag you might not realize? Literally anything I just said. Caught some spelling errors. Found some of the rules from their policy sheet, pretty sure number 4 is illegal. Subscribe for more.